What does faith look like in the home? Today we're going to be talking about that on Deep Dive Podcast, episode 22.
Josh, if you're not careful, you're going to start being an expert at this.
I know.
You just want to, the more you do something, the better you become at it. And we're this is number 22 in this iteration of our podcast.
Right.
Probably.
This is our third 22.
We've had several iterations, haven't we? We've sat across the table from each other in my office for years, and now in the studio. And
yeah, it's weird to think about how, like, we used to just be a little gun club podcast, and look at us now.
Now we're a little podcast in the church.
Yep.
How we stepped up. We were talking the other day about presenting ourselves with an award. Maybe you can 3D print it or something or another. Once we get up to maybe 50 subscribers,
right?
10 subscribers, something like, you see in the background of YouTubers when it's a gold or silver plaque.
Yeah.
Maybe we can make one out of paper.
When we hit 50, we get aluminum foil.
Yeah, aluminum foil
with Sharpie on it.
Love it. I think that would be such a good idea.
When we're going to start experimenting with video on this. It'd be funny to on YouTube channels when the guy's talking in the background, it shows his most recent YouTube plaque or whatever.
Yes.
We should have that in the background.
That'd be so funny. Not ever say anything about it. Just let it be there. You know what I mean? Keep changing the colors.
Yeah.
Make it neon sometime. I bet it wouldn't be. I bet YouTube would have something to say about that. I don't know.
Get a letter from their attorneys.
Yeah, cease and desist.
Stop replicating our awards. We're not replicating anything. You didn't have one in the tier we're in.
That's right. For number 25. Anyway, but we're stepping it up a little bit, Josh. I've been working on the Squarespace podcast website for us.
Yeah.
And
a couple things that are in the works. We're going to be getting a website up. We're putting together a YouTube channel so we can have our podcast, put up there. And we're, I don't know. I think to start out, it might just be the audio upload of the podcast, and then as we start incorporating video and getting used to that, we'll start doing that. Yeah.
Sure, I think so. I think
I need to get a haircut.
Get a haircut. Start going to the gym.
Yeah. Is there some filter that,
there is
puts abs on you or something?
There is, but only to a certain extent,
Wait, what are you saying?
It's looking at me. There is no filter that's going to help me out. We talked a little bit about this last episode, but we did a little poll in some of the classes that we're involved with, and nobody knew how to find us anymore.
Yeah.
Nobody podcast. How do I get a podcast on my? Can I get a podcast on my phone?
Right.
Wow. So.
Well, it's weird because podcasts are really easy to do if you're someone who listens to podcasts.
But if not, it's still.
If not, I've told my mom and dad about it for quite some time, and they still have no idea how to figure it out. Even though I've walked them through it, put shortcuts on their desktop. Come on, mom and dad, we need at least to double our listenership. You know,
Destry's parents are listening.
Yeah.
Let's get forward going.
But everyone knows how to do YouTube, so we figured that's the next mountain to climb.
That's the next mountain.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's uncommon just to have the audio on there. You know
right.
what I mean? The people that the stations that I've seen do it. They just put their logo up and they play it, and it's just that simple. So we're going to start doing it that way and see what happens.
Yep.
We're going to continue to do this. There's no pressure on us to do this for certain numbers or anything, but we put pressure on ourselves.
This is something that you and I, it's important to us,
and
so we do it for that reason more than anything else.
Right.
Even if we're the only two that are listening to it.
That's right.
But
that's right. And sometimes,
I mean, when God puts a burden on your heart, it's your response to that isn't necessarily, well, how many people am I going to be reaching with
That's
this?
right.
No,
Right.
it's, this is something that God's placed on your heart, so you do it. And
That's
this is that. This is one of those things. Neither of us are staff.
Correct.
Neither of us are paid to do this.
Mhm.
It's entirely volunteer, but it's something we've prioritized in our life because we see there's a value in digging deep into Scripture
Right.
and exposing God's Word.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of fun with it.
Well, I was going to say, if it wasn't enjoyable to us, if it didn't bring joy to us, it would be harder to do it if we were called by God to do it. It happens that we're called to do it and we enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
So it's easier to make it a priority.
If for no other reason, I do it for the free coffee.
Yeah, I know, man. How about it? You get free coffee every time you come in.
Yep.
Hey, man, we're going to talk a little bit about faith in the family, and how that looks, how it might change, evolve. We're going to do a short episode today, but faith in the family is important. What does it look like, in your family? How, if you want it to change, how can that happen?
Right.
And should it change, from being single to being married to having children and going out of the house? How does that look like in a household?
Well, last night at church in our Bible study, we were talking about Ruth and Boaz, and because we're going through the book of Judges, and Ruth and the book of Ruth happens within the book of Judges, and Judges, it's this whole history. We're about 3 centuries in from the beginning of Judges to the beginning of Samson. There's about 3 centuries there. But there's this ongoing cycle about Israel doing that which is right in their own eyes, and just overall the nation getting away from God. And you have to often ask. You have to ask the question, like, where does that start? Where does that digression or the progression into chaos? Where does that start? And in Jewish culture, in Hebrew culture, we're tempted to look at that in sort of like a bird's eye view of the entire culture and assume that the center of Jewish culture is the temple, or nowadays the synagogue, or the religious center. But that's not really what it is. In fact, the center, the foundation of that culture is the family. It's the home. I think it's interesting talking about this now because, several weeks ago we celebrated Easter and the resurrection of Christ. Well, this week actually is the week of the Passover. Monday evening was the start of the Passover feast. So if you correlate that to the narrative of the New Testament, you know that the timing of the crucifixion, the resurrection, all that stuff, it's happening this week, not the week that we celebrate it. So, Passover, we think of that in New Testament terms as the Lord's Supper, after which he was crucified. 3 days later, he rose again. So if that was Monday, evening was the Passover, then really today, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 3 days later, today is most likely Resurrection Day.
Resurrection Day, wow.
Yeah. And this meal of the Passover started back in Exodus, and it was something that the family did at the family table, and it commemorated the exodus of Israel from Egypt, their freedom from slavery. And it was after the death of the firstborn son, that 10th plague, that the Pharaoh finally relented and let Israel go. And so you have this meal that's being celebrated in the home that's commemorating the death of the firstborn son that resulted in their freedom. And it was a feast that God told Israel, on the 14th of your first month, the month of Nisan, which is what we're in now on the Jewish calendar, that month, every year celebrate this same feast the same way, commemorating the same thing. In the New Testament, when they were having the Lord's Supper, the Passover meal, Jesus said, sort of enlightened them and said, these different elements that we're eating, this bread that's broken, that's my body. This wine that we're drinking, that's my blood. It represents something.
It's a symbol, man.
And so he told them, when your family is doing this at the dinner table once a year, celebrating Passover, you've been doing it in remembrance of this event that happened in our past, freedom from Egypt, all that stuff. But now I want you to realize the significance of that and what that was actually pointing to and represents, and now do it in remembrance of me. Wow. And so that originated at the table in the home with the family. And I think that there's a tremendous benefit of realizing that the foundation of society, the foundation of our like collective morals, things like that, starts by exercising faith in the home.
In the home. You know what? I've thought about this before, but maybe not as strongly as I just did. Jesus was a genius in marketing.
Oh, absolutely.
If you think about it. Okay, so he took something that people are already doing. They're already doing it, quote, religiously. And he said, now this is going to mean this.
Yeah.
You know, I see the billboard sometime, and it's just a red, white, and blue Pepsi sign. Doesn't say Pepsi, doesn't say anything on it, but everybody on this earth knows that that's a Pepsi sign.
Yep.
You know what? And if somebody were to come out from Pepsi and go, okay, now that sign's going to mean this, that's what Jesus is doing right here.
Yeah.
He's saying,
well, it even goes further than that, because that was the intent from the very beginning.
Unbelievable.
Because all of this was, all of this was set in stone,
Right.
at the beginning of creation,
Yeah,
right?
right.
The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. So that Word existed way back, before the Passover was even instituted the first time. Wow. And so, God does some really cool things all throughout Scripture, especially in the Old Testament. Is He sets up these different symbols or processes or whatever that people that people practice regularly, and that gets ingrained in their mind and ingrained in their culture and everything. And God does that for a reason at that time, but He also does it because after it's been so deeply programmed into their culture and in their history, He reveals to them at some point, this is what that was an indication of. It was pointing forward to something. Here's what that something is. Wow. And this has been the focus the entire time. I think that's amazing.
That is amazing.
His genius at marketing is like, let's get it in deep.
We can learn a lot from that. One of the things that I heard last week was if you have children and you're not intentional about steering them in a direction, be assured that there are other people that are going to be intentional about steering them in a direction.
Absolutely.
And that probably is not going to be the direction you want them to go to.
Yep.
And I thought I was actually walking down the hallway from one assignment to another, going up to the baptistry to take pictures up there, when I heard that. And that just, those 2 or 3 sentences, yes, intellectually I knew that, but it's just one of those things that God used to go, click.
Right.
That's it. And Don and I do not have children, but I am blessed enough to be in front of people teaching, a handful of people every week. So I take that responsibility very seriously. Yeah. And some of them have been there consistently for years upon years upon years,
right?
For whatever reason.
Well, also the ministry you do here at church,
right,
is heavily involved with children.
Absolutely. So, just the little bit of time that we have with them, we need to be strongly intentional, about connecting with God, one another in a lost world. I mean, that's what we say we do, but we got to make sure that we're doing it.
Right.
We got to check ourselves every day.
Yeah, and there's some really practical ways you can do that too, because all throughout my daughter's life, I've tried to make a point to be present in a lot of ways that might not be totally clear at the beginning. So, like, for example,
now, let me say something first.
Go ahead.
You haven't tried to. You have.
Right.
been intentional about. I know that
Yes.
about you.
I've put significant effort into it, like as one of the highest priorities in my life.
You have done that, not only by word but by action, and that your whole business is circled around your family.
That was the primary reason I decided to start my own business, is because I told my last employer, who, by the way, we're still good friends. We still do projects together. He's in retirement, but
because of the way that you presented to him.
It wasn't done in a way that burnt a bridge.
That's right.
It was more or less, expressing my working philosophy overall, right? And I told him, like, I'm to the point in my life and my career where I'm done asking for permission to be a husband and a father.
Yep.
And he realized the significance of that in my life, and it was a tremendous God thing, because he basically said, like, I totally get it. That's who you are, and so as you're,
if that's who you want to be, sure,
right?
If that's good for you.
Well, I saw the business world around me, and there's so many people that devote their entire lives to business. A lot of times they deceive themselves into saying, like, they devote themselves totally to business because of their family, but it ends up taking them away from their family. And Satan's really tricky on that, because he'll allow us to have the right motives that direct us away from that which is important. And so, and I was in that situation a lot of times where it's like, no, I have to do this. I have to, stay at work late. I have to do, have to be away from my family and accomplish this goal, because that'll better position me to provide financially for my family.
Sure.
And I forget that it's not just about the financial provision for family, but the spiritual leadership in the home, and being an emotional support and things like that. And so, Satan will often divert our attention, and he'll even use something honorable to divert us away from something that's more honorable.
I think what we're saying is, Satan is also a genius in marketing.
Oh, absolutely,
right. I mean, that is listen, not a stupid situation going on there.
No, not at all.
Very sneaky.
But in realizing that, the primary reason I wanted to start my business was to give myself more freedom to be present for my family.
Yep, that's right.
I wanted to be able to pick my daughter up from school every day.
And
I wanted to be able to, have lunch with my wife if I wanted to, without having to, like, go ask for permission or something like that. I wanted to be able to leave work early if I needed to help out with something.
Sure.
Or help my wife start her business, or different things like that.
Yeah.
Family was a primary component there, and I was blessed with the ability to make that decision. But as far as getting back to what we were talking about earlier, one of the ways that I found was really useful in incorporating this faith aspect in family was as simple as a conversation on the way home from school. Picking my daughter up from school and being in the car on the way home, instead of just listening to music or whatever, or even instead of just asking her general questions like, so how was school today? Because the default answer in the presence of so much potential information is like, good. Well, that doesn't really do. That gives you one data point of information, but you can't extrapolate from one data point. And so,
what do you ask her?
So I knew what classes she took, and I put in intent towards memorizing what her schedule was for the day. So I knew, like, at the beginning of the day, her first class was math. Second class may have been Bible. Third class may have been history. I knew her classes. I knew her teachers. And so on the way home, we would have a discussion like, so tell me what you learned, what you talked about in math class today, which was great because I love math, being an engineer. And, so we'd talk about what she's learning in math, and, if, where that kind of thing is used in real life. And I love those conversations because, like, I can tell her, oh, that's a really cool thing you're learning in math right now. Here's where I use that in my job as an engineer, and same with science. And but then you can get into the philosophical as well, like as we get into, like, what are you talking about in Bible? Obviously, you can have a conversation about that, which we did. We're learning about Samson right now in the Bible or something like that. And you can start talking to her about, well, it's really interesting because Samson and the way he was tempted and blah, 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 and start to have those conversations about how that applies to life. And, but it also puts a responsibility on you, which is really good, to know what she's talking about, what her class is talking about in school, and on your own incorporating that into your own Bible study so that you can be better prepared for that conversation.
Gotcha.
So it kind of works its way in really well with your life because you're incorporating faith into your family, but it's also driving you to dig deeper into the Word and grow closer to God yourself. And then talking about history. Well, what are you learning about in history? Well, we're learning about the Roman Empire, or such and such emperor or something like that, and you can have conversations. So we would go through every single class on our way home and talk about it. And it was a way of not just being active in her school in what she's learning, but also getting her perspective on it and being able to share your perspective and the Christian perspective on it as you're guiding her through life. And really cool.
Well, let me ask you this, Josh. If we were to ask her, would she say, yes, these are conversations. They're not lectures. They're conversations. I have just as much.
Oh, absolutely.
I have just as much input, and I'm able to talk, and it's a two-way conversation. Would she say that?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And it was intended to be that way because I was more interested in getting her perspective on things than my own.
The reason I ask that is, again, I'll preface this by saying I'm not a parent, but just conversations with other people. By default, it seems to me, even really good friends throughout years, it's just the way we're brought up. We're listening for clues in a conversation to relate to our lives.
Right.
And so you're just waiting for that person to stop talking before you regurgitate everything without even responding to what the person just said. And I think that if parents are listening, or if people are listening, and if I had to say one thing about learning to relate to other people that I've learned in ministry is listen.
Yeah.
Listen to them and have active conversations. We're talking, obviously this person is talking to me about a loss that they just had. I don't have to have had that loss. I probably have, but I'm not going to inject. Consider not injecting your situation into them.
That's not a time to one up their story. Oh, that's nothing. This is what happened to me.
That, by the way, Brian Regan, favorite
the comedian.
Oh my gosh, favorite comedian. The me monster, he calls him.
Yeah.
That's nothing. That's nothing. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry I waste your time.
I know. I'm sorry. I thought it really hurt me. I thought Brian Regan's so funny, but it is true. It's so true. People that are our listeners, do a little experiment. Just eavesdrop on some people talking. They can be best friends, just really enjoying each other's company, but they're having two different conversations.
Right.
One person is just regurgitating, and another person is regurgitating, and that might be cathartic for them, but it's not the same as having a conversation with somebody that you're trying to. It could be very intentional, and that's okay. But all I'm saying, that has its place to be able to just unload. You feel good walking away.
There's communicating with and communicating to.
Yes, there you go. And I like to ask myself, what did you just learn from that person, and what did that person just learn from me? I'm okay most of the time, Josh, with nobody learning anything about me. But whenever I have just unburdened myself to you about having to put down my favorite cat, or that day, and then I had to put down a cat. Look, hey man, that's okay.
Once I put down 3 in one day.
I know. I appreciate you telling me that. Because now I want to help them. I'm thinking, well, that had to be terrible. But we're not taught to do that.
Yeah.
And I think if what we're talking about now is an intentionality conversations with kids.
Right.
So what you're saying is not lecture. Don't lecture your kids.
No, and that's why the car ride home is so great, because it's just a casual environment. It's not like you're standing up in front lecturing someone. It's just a conversation between the driver's seat and the passenger seat.
And how you present that, I think, has something to do with it. You know, like you said, excuse me, how was your day? Fine.
Can you give me some more information?
Yeah.
What information do you want me to give you?
It was fine.
So, and so being intentional about that conversation and going through each class and saying, well, what did you talk about here? And let's discuss that. Like, what do you think
being informed?
Yeah, like, why do you think it was important that, you know, these people threw tea into the river, you know? And
Samson, how about that hair?
Right? Think he had a six-pack?
Yeah. Pretty big guy, right?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, just having that intentional conversation, well, intentional and focused types of conversation, and you know, the same is true for you know, relationship between spouses too. Is you know, the cool thing about, you know, the car ride home is it's largely free from distractions.
Yeah.
And you have to have that kind of environment if you're gonna effectively communicate with somebody, whether it's your kid or your spouse or whatever. And so, you know, putting yourself in that situation where you're having a conversation with someone, you're not necessarily there to lecture to them or to fix their problems for them. That's one that's super difficult for me as an engineer, because like my entire career is based on being able to come in, assess a problem, fix it, go.
That's how you make your living, Josh.
Yeah,
that's why people call you.
Yeah, and that's really dangerous to insert that type of ideology into a family relationship, especially especially a husband and wife. You know, sit there and your wife is sharing, you know, something about something she's going through at work, or you know, some stress she's going through, and you're like, boom, got the solution. Here you go. Implement it. See ya. What's your next problem?
Yep.
You know,
case closed. Next case.
That's not effective in a relationship, you know, but taking the or taking lessons from how Christ communicated with people. He wasn't interested in the problem so much as he was interested in the person. And that's a powerful concept that's really difficult to learn and implement. Is okay, set aside my engineer hat, put on my husband hat, because marriage is a picture of Christ and his relationship with the church. And when you see Christ interacting with people, it wasn't, let me swoop in, solve your problem, and go.
Right.
It was, let me, you know, sit with you, learn who you are, and have fellowship with you. And when you do that with, you know, with a Christian perspective, you know, and Christ at the center of all that stuff, it's a game changer.
I think consistently too. Doesn't have to be long. Like your car rides home are probably no more than 20 minutes, I would imagine. But you do that sometimes 5 days a week, right? So being consistent with that, and being consistent with people, it doesn't have to be long lectures or long times. Just, you know, just having that weekly conversation, or just touching base, or just connecting somehow. Whenever Dawn and I visit our nieces and everything whenever they were younger, I would be very intentional about connecting with each one of them whenever we were visiting up there, even if it was for 5 minutes. That's what we would hopefully remember. You know what I mean? So I imagine it being, if you have children, every day connect eye to eye somehow. Somehow make that happen, or you know, try to make it happen. Like I said, man, I don't have kids, so I don't know. But
well, a lot of that connecting eye to eye it involves being honest with them. You know, especially in my conversations with my daughters, we're talking about Bible stuff and history stuff, and you know, there are a lot of times it's like I shared with her mistakes that I had made, and how it you know messed things up for me, and then how, with God's help, I recovered from that, or if it's something that I'm still struggling with, you know, because we often picture ourselves with respect to our kids as we have it all put together. We're the standard to look up to. Be like me, that kind of stuff. And there is a little bit of truth to that. We want to be a mentor for our kids, but we also have to show them like we're human beings too, and human beings fail. But how do we respond to failure? Because everybody's going to experience failure in their life, and your response to that can be healthy or unhealthy. And your relationship with God is the cornerstone of survival in those types of situations. And being able to be honest with your kids about when that's happened in your life is a really powerful concept.
Josh, you have to. As a matter of fact, you have to go with your the appointment.
Yeah, I got to go meet up with my wife.
Yep, right here, and it's in the morning, and you have that luxury because you were very intentional years ago about having your own business. One quick question before we go.
Okay.
How have you navigated with your daughter the electronics in her life, just her phone and things like that, when it comes to connecting with people?
Right. So I've tried to avoid the sentiment where you just restrict it absolutely, because then when she becomes an adult and she's now has unrestricted access to it, you don't know what to do. I've sort of viewed it as like an inoculation. Okay. When you get inoculated against a disease, you're given a weakened form of that disease in a controlled environment, so that your body can build up a resistance to it. And so I've let her have access to it in a controlled environment where we have access to her phone or her tablet or whatever, and are able to, with or without her knowledge, to just check up on her.
Okay.
And that there's that aspect of it, but that's more of a reactive stance, which has its own range of applicability. But but what I found to be way more useful, more useful, is, like we were saying earlier, is being present in their lives and sharing. Being able to communicate with them long term over that stuff, because then it's more preventative. Getting the ideology in their mind, so that as they're starting to grow and make their own decisions and get exposed to more and more things with or without your knowledge, you've had that foundation of a biblical worldview, so that they're better positioned to respond to those types of temptations as they're presented. So those two things have been primarily how we've done it.
What I can see happening, just knowing you and knowing your daughter a little bit, and hearing what you're saying, it seems to me like on rides home and different places, she has deemed it more important to her to have conversations with you than looking at her phone.
Right.
You have just developed a relationship with her in such a way where she has made that decision.
Right. Well, regardless, I just keep talking to her. So,
so she has to put it down to pay attention to you.
Yeah,
that's good too.
It's not really a conversation we've had. It's just like, I'm just gonna keep talking to you and asking you questions. You
can do both at the same time. Fine.
Yeah, right. But as she grows up, and my parents were the same way with me. The decisions you make and the mistakes you're able to make grow as you do. And so letting her make, quote unquote, harmless mistakes when she's younger that cause her discomfort but aren't really dangerous in the grand scheme of things is important, because as a little kid, making a decision that has consequences better prepares you to avoid that in the future. It's kind of like that verse, he that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much. Well, if you screw up in the least and you figure out how to deal with that, then it helps you to avoid screwing up in the most.
Right. She learns how to navigate out of those situations
as much as possible. I mean, we're all human beings and we all fail.
Yeah,
but our goal is to at least help, aim them in the right direction.
My brother-in-law taught me something. He taught me a lot of things, but one thing is he taught me to fall forward and get back up and keep falling forward. You're going to fall a lot of times, but just fall forward. Don't fall backwards and wonder what to do. Let
your past be a springboard and not a hammock.
Love it. Josh, you got to go, man.
Yeah, I do.
Thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it. And thank you to our listeners. We love y'all. And we will talk to y'all next week.
Alrighty.